Tonight, security forces on high alert in the Indonesian capital in preparation for the presidential selection. Candidates officially launched their bids for the Philippines presidential elections. And America's worldwide search for workers with highly sought-after software skills. Good evening, Rosemary Church with Australia Television News. Amid fears that unrest in Indonesia could escalate, leaders from the country's powerful army are meeting in the capital to discuss security. They're looking at what measures they'll take in the tense run-up to next month's presidential election. The gathering comes as opposition leaders step up their campaigns for President Suharto to stand down. Rioting over price rises and shortages has rocked more than a dozen towns and cities over the last 2 weeks.
Megawati Sukarno Putri has taken her campaign against President Suharto to new heights. As the US ambassador to Indonesia watched on, the opposition leader demanded a government inquiry into a foreign magazine article which puts Suharto's private wealth at $24 billion. It was one of Mrs. Megawati's strongest attacks yet on the president and came on the eve of a crucial meeting of the country's armed forces leadership. Military commanders from all around Indonesia gathered in Jakarta this morning for 2 days of talks ahead of the March presidential elections. High on the agenda will be the selection of a new armed forces chief to replace the soon-to-retire General Faisal Tanjung. Recent unrest and protests sparked by the country's severe economic crisis are also critical issues before the top brass, with more and more Indonesians now calling publicly for political change.
Government's agenda is their own survival and personal and group survival, and so they are not equipped to deal with the rising tide of discontent.
But even those who say they want Suharto's job, like Muslim leader Amin Rais, concede that the long-serving Indonesian leader is showing no sign of departing the public stage.
He will go ahead, he will continue. He is stubborn, so there is no any slightest chance that he will stand down.
With Indonesia's presidential elections just a month away and the country's economic crisis continuing to cut deeper, demonstrations against the Suharto regime are becoming more frequent. But the military has now made it very plain that there's a limit to its tolerance.
Australian Prime Minister John Howard today announced that Australia will send troops to take part in any US-led military strike against Iraq. Howard said it was the hardest decision he's had to make.
Tonight, the Prime Minister was out selling his message.
There is a world security issue involved in this, and that is why Australia has indicated a willingness, if diplomatic solutions and approaches fail, to join the United States-led effort. It's the hardest decision that we've had to take in terms of personal responsibility, because it might involve the exposure of Australian lives. There is a recognition across the political spectrum in Australia about the longer-term implications of this particular issue.
Earlier, John Howard announced that 250 Australians would back the US effort. It'll be a mission more dangerous than the Gulf War. The SAS trained to travel deep behind enemy lines to conduct search and rescue missions. Also set to head to the Gulf, 2 707 refuelling aircraft, along with small medical and intelligence teams. No details yet about when they'll leave. The Prime Minister admits it's risky.
There is, in any theatre of war, the possibility of casualties.
It is a bad thing that things have come to this pass, but they have come to this pass on the responsibility of one person only, and that is Saddam Hussein.
The Islamic community in Australia has condemned the decision.
أستراليا ليس من مصلحتها أن تخدم سياسة الفرد الواحد، سياسة الدولة الواحدة، سياسة أمريكية.
I want to say to Australians of Islamic faith and of Islamic background, and in no way is this decision an adverse judgment on your contribution to the Australian community.
But internationally, regional opposition to the bombing is intensifying. In London, King Hussein of Jordan declaring his stand against the bombing after a meeting with Tony Blair. The US is continuing its massive build-up, announcing today that 3,000 additional troops will be dispatched. 4 more American warships are steaming towards the Gulf, carrying another 2,000 Marines. They'll join the 20 warships already there. Tonight, the reality is beginning to sink in. Australia may be at war again for the first time since 1991. The difference between now and then, this time the Arab world is sticking with Saddam Hussein.
Meanwhile, Iraq describes as absurd claims that it's producing enough biological or chemical weapons to fill 2 warheads a week. But it has shown in the past that it's prepared to use the lethal weapons on innocent civilians, and concerns that it may do so again have sparked the latest standoff.
Saddam Hussein has used weapons of mass destruction before. 5,000, mainly women and children, had terrible deaths after the Iraqi dictator bombed the Kurdish village of Halabja with cyanide and mustard gas. Hussein also used mustard gas in the Iran-Iraq war. According to the UN, Iraq's biological arsenal includes some 8,500 litres of concentrated anthrax, deadly bacteria which are usually fatal in 5 days when inhaled. Also stockpiled 19,000 litres of the toxin responsible for botulism. It fatally paralyses the muscles of the lungs. Australian scientists provide some of the best independent expertise on the Iraqi arsenal. Those that have worked in Iraq are bound by secrecy agreements, but the chief defence scientist is able to give some assessment of the threat. Particularly worrying, Saddam Hussein's stocks of VX nerve gas.
VX and VX-like nerve agents are very lethal. Just a couple of drops on your skin will kill you.
The scientists say placing the nerve gas on Iraq's remaining Scud missiles would put cities like Tel Aviv and Riyadh at risk of chemical attack.
In the Philippines, the presidential race has begun. Candidates have officially lodged their bids for the May election. There are more than 70 contenders, but they'll be whittled down to less than 10 as officials weed out so-called nuisance candidates.
Hundreds came to show support for candidates who arrived to officially file their candidacy for the presidential post. There were cheers, music and dancing on the streets. First to arrive was Liberal Party candidate Alfredo Lim, who came marching with his supporters. Lim, the tough-talking mayor of Manila, nicknamed Dirty Harry because of his Clint Eastwood-like aggressive pursuit of criminals, is former President Corazon Aquino's favored candidate. Along with his running mate, Senator Sergio Osmeña, Lim submitted his documents to commission staff inside a very crowded room. Next to arrive was Speaker of the House, Jose de Venecia, and Senator Gloria Arroyo, running for President and Vice President respectively for the party of President Fidel Ramos, the Lakas NUCD. Ramos is unable to run for a second term under the Constitution. But de Venecia is expected to face a tough fight with Vice President Joseph Estrada, a former movie actor who is far ahead in most popularity polls. Apart from Lim, de Venecia and Estrada, who are at least 5 others, including Imelda Marcos, the widow of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, who have entered the race for the highest position in the land.
3 American religious leaders have arrived in the Chinese capital to begin a fact-finding tour. China appears to have agreed to the visit to head off criticism at the United Nations Human Rights Commission later this year.
The 3 Americans are in China on an unprecedented fact-finding tour. They hope it's a sign that the communist regime is learning to accept the importance of religious faith.
Just as the body requires nourishment, the soul requires nourishment. So whether we are Chinese, American, or any human being, we need that spiritual energy. We need that faith. And that's really what we're all about.
And they insist they don't want to interfere.
We're not going to solve all the problems. Whether there are problems, we're not going to solve them all. We're not going to make changes that are going to be extraordinary. We're here to begin to talk.
The most sensitive part of their 18-day tour will be a visit to Tibet, where the struggle for religious freedom is bound up with the fight for independence. Although a more tolerant attitude has been adopted, the Dalai Lama remains in exile, and his deputy, the 8-year-old Panchen Lama, was chosen by the Chinese. But the guests are determined not to judge.
We're not here to inspect, that's not our idea, but to share the importance of freedom of conscience issues and the ability to practice one's faith as they so desire.
With China anxious to shed its repressive image abroad, it's hoped these new ideas will be welcomed.
Britain's Prince Charles is in the tiny Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. The kingdom fiercely clings to its traditions and shuts out most Western influence. But critics accuse its ruler, one of the world's last absolute monarchs, of repressing some of his people.
The Royal Bhutan Airlines flight from Kathmandu gave a good view of Mount Everest before the BA-146 dropped sharply between the mountains to land at Bhutan's only airport. The officials were in the national dress, the go. By law, all men must wear it, with long socks and brogues. This is a land of tradition and obedience, and of stunning beauty. Great fortress monasteries dominate the mountain passes. Though seen by few, tourism is strictly controlled. Even the houses are controlled. All must be of the same style. Prayer flags flutter everywhere. Prince Charles's aim in coming here is to experience its remoteness, and the show laid on for him was designed to reinforce the Bhutan king's policy of one nation, one people. Archery, with its ancient skills but high-tech bows, is the national sport. The king is resisting most Western influence. There's no television, but also no democracy. Amnesty International says that Bhutan is not Shangri-La, and it was about time the world woke up to what was going on. 100,000 Nepali-speaking people have fled or been forced out, a fifth of the population. In Nepal, dissidents are campaigning for democracy in Bhutan and want Prince Charles's help.
I would like to appeal to His Highness that these refugees are desperate to go home, and that he should express this opinion on our behalf to our king.
The prince's aides say does not get involved in politics, but the dark side of the kingdom of the Thunder Dragon must undermine the natural sympathy he has with the values of tradition. The Prince of Wales might have been hoping that this would have been a pleasant few days communing with the mountains, but there are political overtones to this visit which could make it more controversial.
Delegates at Australia's Constitutional Convention have found themselves in dispute tonight. Republican delegates are divided between those supporting a direct election of a president and those wanting a parliamentary endorsement. But some delegates are denying they're at an impasse.
Impasse? Who said impasse?
No, we've never reached an impasse. There is a difference of opinion.
If not an impasse, it's because the various Republican delegates are heading in as many as 10 different directions. That's the number of models that have been presented for a republic, and those holding out for direct election of the president won't accept anything less than they want.
It is always possible that you get a walkout when people feel that they haven't been heard, and that would be a catastrophe.
Some direct election delegates have threatened to support retention of the monarchy if they don't get their way. The response?
It's a great shame, and I guess they have to live with their own conscience on that.
The Republican movement stresses it's against direct election of the president because, even though it may be popular now, history shows a change will need the backing of both major parties.
The reality is, if it doesn't have mainstream bipartisan political support, history tells us it will fail.
The Prime Minister tonight weighed in on the prospect of some direct election delegates trying to force the choice of a model for the Republic to a plebiscite. In other words, by refusing to endorse any model presented at the convention, there would have to be a plebiscite first, and the choice from that would have to go to a referendum.
I think a plebiscite would be a big mistake.
The number of models for the Republic has grown, not shrunk, as the final vote approaches. But the divide remains between those who want the people to choose the president and those who say a people's choice would politicise the position. The Australian Republican movement has moved to support the idea of initial public involvement in nominating candidates for the presidency, then leaving it up to a parliamentary decision.
There's room for further compromise, and I've not the slightest doubt that right till the death we'll be talking and bargaining.
In the meantime, even the warriors are wearying.
To sport now, and the alpine program of the snow-hit Winter Olympics finally got underway today in Nagano amid a flurry of protests. Leading competitors in the combined slalom have complained the course is too tricky and icy.
In snow as heavy as it's been, but colder, therefore drier, the combined slalom started after a 3-day delay on a course described as scandalous by Norway's Lasse Djus, who still managed the second fastest slalom run.
The number one time has been eclipsed.
He'll rely on his preferred downhill run, scheduled for Thursday, to catch Austrian Mario Reiter, who was more than 3 seconds ahead after the opening round.
He's done it easily, 0.72. He's the man.
Russian Larissa Lasatina went one better than her silver in the 15K to win the 5-kilometre cross-country classical. Her tears a mixture of pain and relief at finally claiming the gold medal. German George Hakel became the 6th athlete to win 3 consecutive Winter Olympic gold medals, a clear winner in the men's luge.
He is the greatest.
The 500-metre speed skating championship will be decided tonight with Japan's Hiroyasu Shimazu, who smashed the Olympic record last night, leading after the first round.
Returning now to Indonesia, where prospects are looking bleak for many people who are preparing to go back to work after the Ramadan holiday. Financial experts say 50 million more people will lose their jobs.
The Ramadan break may not end for millions of Indonesians. Many may be on permanent holiday. People are returning from the countryside to jobs in the city centres. But workers arrive only to find they no longer have a job. This worker says, "We just got fired. It's not fair because the company let us go without explanation." The Indonesian economic crisis has already forced more than 1.5 million people out of work. And it's not over. Financial analysts predict 50 million more are soon to follow. The fall of the rupiah, combined with rising prices, has forced many businesses to shut down. The government has been scrambling to restore confidence. $1 billion has been earmarked to battle joblessness. But the efforts have done little to alleviate the unemployment surge. Half-finished construction projects scar the city. Others line up outside factories queuing for jobs that don't exist. One workers' group isn't taking such a passive approach. A renegade union is trying to force the company to hire them back. But union action is unlikely to solve the labour crisis. The Suharto government has outlawed unions, giving the strikers no legal recourse in an Indonesian court.
And Australian firms have been warned to exercise extreme caution if they want to invest in Indonesia. The warning comes as Asian investors have started reducing their overseas investments, including those in Australia.
One retailer, Brashs, is already facing the music. Administrators have been appointed to consider the chain's long-term future. Reports from Asia suggest Brashs' controlling shareholder, Singapore billionaire Ong Beng Seng, is selling his overseas assets because of the region's economic crisis. It's believed Mr. Ong is also reviewing his other Australian businesses. Economists say it's the start of a trend as overseas investors shore up their domestic cash flows.
It's likely that Asian business people will reassess their holdings of Australian assets right across the board, whether it's in tourism, whether it's in commercial property, or whether it's in residential property.
At the same time, business consultants are warning Australians against investing in Indonesia, saying things are too unstable.
6 months ago, the country was looking at growth at around 7%. Today, they'll be lucky to get anywhere close to zero.
It's so desperate, the Indonesian government is now considering pegging the rupiah to the US dollar. There's also talk of the G7 nations establishing a $15 billion fund to help Indonesia repay its debts. The news helped the rupiah surge 15% this afternoon. Last week, the federal government announced plans to underwrite Australian exports to Indonesia. Michael Bachmann says that was a mistake and will result in Australian taxpayers bailing out Indonesian import companies owned by President Suharto's family.
One would have to question whether or not that is something that Australian taxpayers would necessarily want.
Mr. Bachmann admits the credit insurance will still benefit Australian exporters.
Taiwan, meanwhile, has remained virtually unscathed by the regional economic crisis. But now the country is facing worker unrest, with the pork industry threatening strike action if the government cuts protective tariffs. The move may thwart Taiwan's bid to enter the World Trade Organization.
Supermarket prices may fall in Taiwan. The government wants to drop protective tariffs on rice, pork, and chicken. It's part of a plan to win over the United States in its bid to enter the World Trade Organization. Taiwan must demonstrate a commitment to open its markets to global trade. But farmers say international diplomacy doesn't pay the bills. The pork industry is staging demonstrations to stop the 45% tariff cut. Grain importers are also joining the fight, boycotting American grain and feed. The backlash hasn't stopped the government push for World Trade membership. Taiwan has scheduled meetings with officials from the U.S. and the European Union. Taiwan may ignore powerful industry lobbyists, but it won't be as easy to put off China, who's objecting to the island's entry to the world body.
And now to the region's stock markets. Tokyo shares closed barely higher as a wait-and-see mood prevailed ahead of a market holiday. Stocks in Hong Kong moved slightly lower on profit-taking following an overnight drop on Wall Street. Strong buying helped Singapore's STI index climb 4%, buoyed by firmer Asian currencies. Australian shares dipped 0.5% as buyers remained on the sidelines during the initial days of the profit reporting season. The Aussie dollar regained some ground and commodities also firmed. American companies are on the hunt for workers with software knowledge. Tens of thousands of people are needed to fill the shortfall, and the search has gone global.
Available now?
Through merchandising,
Hand in your resumes if you want to win a t-shirt.
mailings, and modems, companies are making their pitch for workers in the information field.
We took care of it.
Computer services giant EDS hired 27,000 workers last year alone. This year, it could need another 30,000. It takes creativity to fill those cubicles.
We're not saying that you have to be a computer science degreed person in order to come to work at EDS. When we talk about traits, we're talking about folks who are willing and ready and able to learn.
When you're writing your program,
There simply are not enough computer science majors to go around, and so EDS pays for people like Hubert Chen to attend a programming class. In college, he was a music major.
When you're reading some music, it's like musical code, and when you're coding, it's like notes.
Then there's the search for experienced workers who are not necessarily looking to change jobs. Cisco Systems in California tries to entice these so-called passive job seekers. Many of them surf the web during the workday to keep tabs on job prospects, but they don't want their supervisors to know about it.
If for some small chance that maybe somebody's doing this from work, we thought about that as well. So as you're coming down here and say, oh, potentially my boss just came in, I could click on there and it would bring up the 7 most successful habits of a great employee.
Even that's not enough. Companies are so desperate that they have to leave the country to find people with the computer skills they need.
you will receive relocation assistance.
A Pittsburgh company supplies computer workers from India and other countries.
The market out there is getting extremely competitive.
Its top recruiter searches the globe for brain power.
I literally live and breathe, where is my next programmer? Where am I going to see the next person who's going to give me a lead?
Can you have a resume?
And for recruiters, it will not get any easier.
We're growing tremendously, so we're looking for good people.
The government estimates that 1 million new jobs requiring software knowledge will be created in the next 9 years.
And before we go, let's take a look at Wednesday's weather. Sunshine forecast for Seoul and Tokyo, although cold. Rain expected in Hong Kong and Hanoi, and cloudy elsewhere. Stormy in 34 in Bangkok, Bombay and Dakar sunny, New Delhi haze, Rangoon fine and Colombo cloudy. Fine across most of this region, apart from rain in 32 in Jakarta and showers for Christmas Island. Rain heading for Sydney, Canberra and Brisbane, Darwin storms, showers in Port Moresby, Suva and Noumea. Norfolk Island overcast, Honiara haze and fine for the remainder. And that's the news from Australia Television for the moment. We'll leave you with pictures from the start of Brazil's carnival season in Rio de Janeiro. I'm Rosemary Church. Enjoy your evening. Good night.